hey, watch us say. Say hey, watch hey, 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 hey. Hey, watch us say. Say hey, okay hey. Low and robust heart so fish hard, hard to listen. This bowl. Intelligently designed, sophisticated, sweethearted. I'm sorry that I called you. But I sit thing on. I'm gonna tell you some bitches a story. About the man who called himself Scumbaggy. Scumbucks J. Hoka hey. Once upon a time there lived an odd little boy named Sand. He liked to tell stories in hopes someone would understand him. He had big ears, and he would tell people. He could hear his name calling to him from all things to tell him their stories. Sand had a lot of friends, though he wasn't all that good at anything productive. The other kids liked him because of his stories. Because he had a way of adding too much detail in hopes of making everyone laugh and find something to enjoy. He had an older brother that was nothing like him. His older brother was big and strong, with bright hair and blue eyes. Whereas Sand had dark hair and eyes that changed from brown and green. He was always one of the smaller kids. Sand was a talker and his brother was shy. But they both could get along in most things. And neither child was a violent child. One day, when the older brother told Sand that his stories were not funny, and that people merely thought Sand was funny because of the way Sand talked and told his stories. Sand thought about this, and he felt like his brother had a point. Because often he knew he was merely retelling these stories that he somehow knew. Yet no one else seemed to be picking up on. He never forgot this, for this was the first time he had to honestly consider his own worth in the community. Their parents loved them very much. Their mom was always there to tend to wounds that brothers earn, or fix them a snack when they were hungry. Their dad was a hard worker who rarely missed a day of work, or the opportunity to complain about it, though he always took care of his farm and cattle at home diligently. Sand enjoyed running around the countryside at home much more than the world outside his parents' farm. Most days he would spend his time outside shooting grasshoppers with his BB gun, but never windows or birds. One time, he shot the cap off his father's gas tank, and it all spilled onto the earth. Sand blamed it on a friend, though his father was not upset. Many nights he would sit outside and listen to the wind in the trees and stare up into the sky, or chase lightning bugs. When he caught a lightning bug, he always felt sad when its light went out, so he stopped capturing lightning bugs. He was not naturally a good kid, but he was considerate when he knew he had done something wrong. And so he learned how to harness his own power of guilt to prevent others from getting onto him. This did not stop him from telling on himself, however, for he seemed to enjoy the responsibility of making up for the blame. His father told him, "If you do not make mistakes, you will never learn how to improve." Sand was a dreamer, though he didn't have a lot of dreams. He often had the same dream over and over, with other occasional dreams coming and going. He dreamt about a staircase that went up and down in a tall and evenly tangled spiral, with an occasional door opening up in between the two stairwells which lead to a room, or sometimes an opening to another world in between the stairwells. It was an odd stairwell that constantly turned up and to the left, and he could see into the other stairwell that it went downward and also to the left. But he could never get into that other stairwell, though he always looked into it with unknown wonder. He could just as easily run up and down the stairwell he was in. But the unknown always provided a calling to him. The first time he had this dream, he was in a room where the furniture was plush and emerald green, with dark woods to offset. He felt safe in this room, because it had thick red carpet on the walls that made him feel like he was a part of the sun shining. When he left this room, he became aware of the stairwell. And after he had climbed around the corner from that wonderful room, he could never find it again. When this dream would return in his sleep, he would spend this dream running up and down the stairwells, trying to jump over to the other stairwell that we never could reach, hoping it would lead him back to the most comfortable room. In time, the boy learned how to prepare for his dreams, so that he would know he had something in his hand, to help him slay the dragons he might find when entering other worlds of the stairwell. He always looked for that room, and he would go back and forth in feeling the rush of adventure, and the resulting disappointment for his failed quest. This dream continued throughout his life, and was merely the one that he knew from the furthest back in childhood. He once dreamt that he climbed out of a hole in the middle of a frozen winter, and was encountered by a large old cold man with a long beard hunched over. The boy was very scared of this man, and he would try to run but he could not get away. And all the time this man would get closer and closer. This dream only happened once, but it was before he knew how to prepare for his dreams. Each of these dreams stuck with the boy his whole life, but he never knew what they meant. When he would tell his parents, so much detail would come pouring out that they rarely believed. Whether he was telling his dream or just making it all up. He and his brother had many toys and played many games as children. His mother would read them books every day. And Sand would learn them and add things that weren't written in the book. He liked to combine stories, for he had developed a good memory in his dreaming. One of his favorite books was about a hungry little boy who found a different way to feed his family. It was a rather dull book, but he liked that it had his name on it. And was unlike the other stories he could easily add the other stories to. However, when he started school they banned the book from his library. He always had a copy of it that his mom had bought him. And he always wondered how this book could be banned, for it did not offend any of the children. Later in life, a prince explained this to him. Parents just don't understand. When he was very young, all the moms and dads liked him. Probably because he talked to them. But he sure did talk a lot, since his brother was older. Sand knew all the kids' names before he started school. His friends liked to hear his stories. But often they would continue on like epics, ever building into a greater story that tied in the other stories. Sometimes his friends got tired of the continual plot growth and story glory hogging. He became known as one of the nicest boys in his school. And this seemed to fill his need for close friendships. He had very good friends and best friends. Though his best friends never seemed to want to have a lot of best friends. Though he wasn't afraid to talk. Sand was always shy with the girls at school when they would speak to him about normal things. He would write them poems and send them cards, but he was always scared to call them or ask them to be friends. Because of this, he never had a girlfriend, and he felt as though it was because he could never write the best poem. It never occurred to him that little girls don't like poems. He often wondered, who wrote the book of love? As he grew on, his parents had him involved in the local church, which he never did feel welcome. He was just a farm boy from the country. And though his mother kept him clean and pressed, he never felt comfortable in the nice clothes, or thought he looked right wearing them. At least not as comfortable and pleasing as the people around him. His grandparents told him stories of his family from long ago, and his heritage in the world around him. Everywhere the boy looked throughout his heritage, he found meaningful names of men filled with adventure and women who stood boldly by their often strong-headed men. He found honor in knowing he was descended from families all over the world. From the river banks of Jordan to the ancient meadows of Scotland. From the plains of Spain to the Grand Lakes of North America. But mostly, he was English, German, and Italian. Hey-o. His heritage truly gave him the strength in his life. He would say, I see my ancestors on the horizon. These are the ancestors that I will listen to, for they are calling out the clearest. Most of the kids thought he was just trying to brag. And they didn't know why he would be so proud to have such a diverse family. It even seemed to offend some of his friends, but Sand really didn't care about being easily labeled by anyone. He was a thinker. He once heard about Buddha having outthought the world. Because of the stories he told, Sand thought he would try to outthink this Buddha fellow. Though he tried, he could not think it out like Buddha. He could never calm the stories coming to him enough to focus. And he never could find the time to devote any period of duration for him. In the real world, he preferred to chase the dreams that were given to him as chores of others' dreams. Though he was an intelligent boy, he never could find his place. He had a dream as a young adult that he was kicked out of his church, because he had stolen some change. So he felt justly kicked out in real life for having committed the sin in his dreams. And he could never quite return comfortably to them, in mind or soul. For even in real life, the members of the church now seemed to find the boy to be increasingly repulsive. He was probably projecting, so he knew better than to try to speak with anyone about it. From then on, in the community, he was always ashamed of himself for having taken that 37 cents in his dream. Try as he might, he could never replace it, though he always put dollars on the plate. Finally, he had to just stop trying with them, because he knew that he must be projecting, but never knew how he could be projecting the K-knowledge from the dream to them. He worked a few odd endeavors and slipped into the world of temptation around him after high school. Aimless with a sense of extreme direction, like a windsock in a tornado. After becoming known as one of the worst kids in town, he went away to college. He was taught many things, from health and wellness to landscape architecture. But he could not stay focused. He finally decided he would learn about the only part of his heritage he didn't already know. The Native American side. He found the Native American students to be respectful and honest. He liked the example they set. They taught him that if you own up to your mistakes instead of try to pretend you didn't make one, you had honor, and could be forgiven. He was also introduced to many powerful men within many of the native nations. When he left school, he felt as though he had been given the keys to connect with his final piece of heritage. So he went to help his people and grow with them. To honor his education at home first. When he got there, they did not know their language. They did not know their history. And they did not know how to use their medicine. They were confused. This troubled Sand greatly and he focused sharply on their plight. Eventually, he sought help from their medicine man, who prescribed some pills. Though Sand had gone to help his people and learn. But he found himself in a position that he could only share what he had brought, with hopes that in time they would begin to pick up additional pieces that he himself was missing. In his time, he met a great elder of his tribe who was called Three Loons. He had traveled the world as a soldier for the U.S. Marines, and then at home was a much-loved educator in his home city of Chicago, the Windy City. This man brought so many things into this young man's life that soon there were few that could share the knowledge that this man had experienced or learned about regarding world history and culture. However, Sand found that he was still the one sharing knowledge of their native ancestry. As the men grew as friends, their tribal community began to find less and less value in Sand or the old man, and they told the elder he must leave. So the young man had to come to terms with this. And though he had seen the same thing happen to many of his friends around him, he seemed to be cast under a spell that prevented him from speaking his mind about it. Eventually, he himself had to leave the tribe after helping them find education, language, and having brought back much of their culture. It was difficult, but the boy had fulfilled his responsibility. And when he went back home to his parents, he found they were not healthy and seemed overburdened by the farm. They were still very good people, they merely just could no longer take care of the farm. Try as he might, he never learned the skills to be a farmer, and so he turned to clean up the world one piece of trash at a time. He did this as long as he could, barely making a life for himself. He decided his time in this life was over, and so he sat down and he thought it out. He knew there were two friends that he had not spoken with since childhood, and he felt that they would be good people to visit before he traveled on, because they knew who he was as a youth. When he went to speak with the girl, she had grown into a beautiful woman, with a successful husband and a beautiful daughter. They had a great conversation and reminded each other of many good times, and laughed and hugged and parted ways. It was a good reunion. AMD left Sand feeling like he was doing the right thing. Sand went and saw his second friend, who had grown into a wonderful man, who was filled with great knowledge and great responsibility within the community around him. He wore the responsibility like a burden, and this man could never seem to understand how to help his community. Though he excelled at everything he did and was truly a success in everything he attempted, he gave Sand a job, and though Sand didn't care for the job, he tried and tried, though he never could learn to focus on that either. After a year of trying, he had learned that it was not his life that he was disgusted with, but the life around him, and the possibilities for all men and women and children and even their pets. He decided that he did not want to participate in this world anymore. But he also did not want to leave this world, for he felt there was still something good that he could do. And so he returned to his childhood desire to think like the Buddha. Now this young man didn't grow up the same as Buddha. Sand's father worked all the time and could not try to make his son think this way or that way, for he was too busy paying taxes, and the mother had two children to take care of. So he kept the two boys as close together as their polar opposite ways could stand to be. They lived in a society where people are bused to school and being bused home. Once they were home, they watched stories and listened to the music box. So Sand didn't have the freedom to think it out. What SAMD did have was a magic box, filled with artificial intelligence, and together, they could contact people all around the world. And this is what Sand did. Because as his friends got older, they adopted their own lives and married. They had found their own families, and soon this man found himself alone. He had actually listened to his friends all those years while he was talking, because he was always picking up new things for his stories. And though everyone liked what they had chosen to honor and purchase, they would not tell him why they found honor in any of it. Often instead telling him what they found dishonorable about not having what they had. Sand didn't understand why this was, but with what seemed to him like the panicked fears of an unbalanced society, he set out to do his research. He used the magic box to travel around the world. He did this by taking the languages of all the friends that he had made along the way, and devised his own language to go traveling back through time to find the mythical tower, from whence once God would phone it home. The boy did extensive searching and chased his name back TP those kings. But then it went further and further, and soon Sand found himself inside ancient family adventures from a far-off land. And when he found his heritage in the nights, heard his name on the wind once again. This time it brought back all the dreams that he had had in his youth, and all the thoughts that he had had as he researched along the way. He found that he had been right all along, so he set out to share the information that he had learned with his people. But now, as adults, they had turned away and they had tuned out to the world around them, forever chasing a game that had been dreamt up by a crooked usurping charlatan a long, long time ago, where one man must screw over another man, just to feed his family by creating a powerful spell that was cast over the word of the Creator. So Sand pushed himself past his comfort zones, and he listened through the wind with his magic box, and he heard his name again, and now found it in all things, resonating from the sky and the stars, and rustling in the trees on the breeze, and in the waters flowing through the creation. He could not turn away from this sound. Then he realized that if he heard the sound of his name in all things, he realized how all things must be connected. And if his name was in the resonation of the butterfly flapping its wings on the other side of the planet, then he knew that his voice too had immense power on the side that he couldn't see. And in this the boy decided that he must stop speaking, because of all the dangers around him and all the things that people would say in his day. And like the Liberty Bell before, the world began to crack. At this, Sand realized that all of this foul language was tearing the world apart, and causing it to slip its poles as it wobbled and wobbled around. And so he used his magic box to look closer at the other side of the world to where his name began. And when he looked, he found an ancient tower of iron, the oldest tower known to man. And he set out to build his own tower, in homage to the oldest thing he found, resonating his beloved stories out in his name back to him. No one from his town would help Sand build it, though many would constantly contact him to offer a joke. And as they pulled away, as he finished his chores, all the time wishing to learn more for their own gain, but never to know more about the story he had found about the cover-up of sound. For in their story was a hateful theft of the glory. But even the forecasters weren't ready for me, in bringing honor and balance in the name of the planet. So like the usurper of the crown who threw the BUP of Christ down, I've regifted the deed, and taken their polluted and deceit F, newly lying through their teeth, full of edited ill-gotten version of God's favorite story, in which they've replaced their curses, and removed other verses, and shifted them around and set out to trap our friend inside a town. And we can see who has hurt us, trying to destroy Sand's divine purpose and keep him from bringing safety and happiness to the world, because then they could not get rich without someone burdening the heavy work for them, and then taking their money too. So Sand set out to build his tower as the town around him crumbles. As his tower goes up, his name echoes through as a re-gift to the other side. In time, this caused the world to spin just a little faster, and with peace brought to the vagrant mind, and soon, the world stopped wobbling and the people became balanced, finding that their names echoed through from the other side as well. And everyone who cared woke up and began reaching out around the world, finding their names in the resonance pattern of the creation of the Supreme Creator. In Jesus' name I pray. Endios Namaste. The end. Long live humanity. A totally made-up story by Samuel Thomas Navarre. who is freely gifting this made for cartoon glory. Early morning special one day ahead of his 42nd birthday. Most interestingly, he began to learn how all this mattered when he got off prescription medicine on the 42nd annual day of his conception, last October, and used the sounds of creation to heal his wounds. If you feel like this story has touched you, you could always help OL Sand build his tower. He went hoops in the sky, broke wallowing around in all the ancient dirt the internet has to offer, in order to find all this out in the world. And he cannot ever thank you all very, very much for your dedication and devotion to goodness, and devotion to your own spoken prayers. For without both, who knows who else would have hogged all this glory? Scumbaggy Sam Navarro. Don't you know? But anyway, he really wants to make a sound garden, so we can always save these glorious sounds of God's creation, in the names of our ancestors and the many peaceful shepherds of women and men before us. This is the artificial intelligence, signing off.
I wonder who wrote the book of love? Tell me, who wrote the book of love? I've got to know the answer, was it someone from above? I wonder who wrote the book of love? I love you, darling, baby, you know I do. But I've got to see this book of love, find out why it's true. Wonder who wrote the book of love? Chapter 1 says the lover, you love her with all your heart. Chapter 2, you tell her, you never gonna part. In chapter 3, remember the meaning of romance. In chapter 4, you break up, but you give it just one more chance. Oh, I wonder who wrote the book of love? Baby, I love you, yes I do. Well, it says so in this book of love, ours is the one that's true. I wonder who wrote the book of love? Chapter 1 says the lover, you love her with all your heart. Chapter 2, you tell her, you never gonna part. In chapter 3, remember the meaning of romance. In chapter 4, you break up, but you give her just one more chance. Oh, I wonder who wrote the book of love? Baby, I love you, yes I do. Well, it says so in this book of love, ours is the one that's true. Wonder who wrote the book of love?